Okay, Jeff, I think that's good. We got a good group here, so if you're ready, let's take it away.
Okay. Well, as we know, the first thing we want to do is get tuned up. Uh, and I guess each week we can kind of add maybe a little bit more to this. And one thing that I always hear from people a lot is I ask them if their guitar needs tuned, and they'll say, "Well, I just tuned it yesterday, or I tuned it, 2 days ago, or I tuned it I tuned it earlier today when I got up." And I always ask people, I said, "Do you know how long it takes your guitar to go out of tune?" About like that much. And all I got to do is bump one of these, and I got a string that's out of tune. So, what the basic idea is that we always want our guitar to be in tune all the time, as much as possible. Can't ever avoid bumping it. That happens to everybody. I got a lot of battle scars up here where I bumped this a lot, but I just knocked it out of tune to show you that it doesn't take very long at all. So I always want to make sure that it's actually in tune before I start to play. So I'm going to play my string, and then we can take a couple minutes here and make sure everybody's in tune, especially today, because what we're going to do today is going to be really, really important that we actually have all the strings as close to being in tune as we can, so we can actually sound good, because we're going to be playing a lot of them together today. So anyway, there's my sixth string. I'm going to play that a couple times in a row so you can get yours in tune. And the fifth string. And the fourth string. And the third. And the second. And the first. And like we said before, knowing the sentence "Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie" is a great way to remember the names of the strings, the note names of the strings as you play them. Most tuners are going to tell you what note you're playing. If your string goes really far out of tune, when you play the sixth string, for example, it's supposed to be E, Eddie. It's supposed to be E. If it gets really far out of tune and it tells you an F, something's obviously really wrong. It's not the tuner's doing actually what it's supposed to. It's telling you that it's out of tune. It's tuned to a different note. So we need to know what those notes are. So that's the important part there. Last week we kind of worked a little bit on songs that we played on one string, and the example that we had of that was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. We also had another song towards the end of class I wrote in the chat screen that we wrote down, which was called Seven Nation Army. To back up a little bit, when we did Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, you could play that. We had it written on the first string, so that it was like this. Now I can keep going through the entire song that way on that one string, and as long as I only play on one string, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter whether you're in tune or not. It'll still sound like the right song, because the musical distance from one note to the next is exactly the same regardless of how my guitar is tuned. So I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, because it does. But obviously I can play them on any string I want. It doesn't really matter. It still sounds like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as long as I play the right numbers, the right frets. Now when it does start to matter is when we start to play together with other people and things like that, or if somebody says, well, I want to play with a piano player, then I've got to play the right notes. But that's sort of why this week it's going to be really, really important that our strings are in tune with one another, is because we're going to play more than one string at the same time. As a matter of fact, we kind of touched on that a little bit last time, where we played an E minor chord. And the E minor chord sounds like this. I'm playing all 6 strings at the same time. If one of the strings is out of tune, it's not going to sound like necessarily like an E minor chord. So that's one of the reasons why we really want all of these to be in tune. Back up to the tuning thing. I think we pointed out last week that one of the things I hear a lot from people is, I ask them if their guitar needs tuned, and they'll say, I don't know. They go like this. That's not really supposed to sound like anything. That's pretty much like playing all the notes of a piano, just banging on all of them like this and expecting it to sound like something. So what we're learning is we're going to be learning chords, and chords are an excellent way for us to check the tuning of our guitar, because we know that these are supposed to sound good together. And so if something sounds a little bit off, if I play a chord and it sounds a little bit fuzzy, potentially my guitar could be out of tune. So I believe Nick has a sheet, a music sheet that we're going to go over. He's going to send it, email it to everyone. I'm also going to share my screen with you so you can see what I'm looking at. But he'll be emailing this to everybody. And of course, once again, all these lessons are going to be recorded. So if you need to make any reference to the tuning, or where to put your fingers on a particular chord, or you know, how to do something, you certainly can feel free to go back and watch these. I'm going to share my screen, I think. This paper, actually, the second chord that's here is the one we learned last week, and I know it's kind of small, especially if you're on a phone, so I'm going to zoom in as close as I can get to this, and hopefully that works. We're looking at this one, this E minor, right in the center, and at the top of the sheet, the symbol that's used for minor up at the title is just a lowercase m. As we talked last week, there's several different symbols that can be used for minor chords, and without getting a lot of detail, it can be very confusing because a capital M and a lowercase m can look about the same when you're handwriting something. And so 2 guys in Los Angeles named Brandt and Romer made a little pamphlet on what they called standardized chord symbols. And I don't know that they've really been adopted by everyone, but at least they made the effort. And there's a publisher of music named Shure Publishing that actually publishes a page out of their book in the front using their symbols. So I thought, hey, these guys at least made the effort. So anyhow, that's why there's different symbols for minor chords. I always use their advice is to use MI for minor. So this is an E minor chord. Minor chord is a group of notes. A lot of people describe the minor chords as sounding sad. So we're going to sort of, go over the difference between major and minor and all that kind of stuff. First of all, when you play a chord, you're playing 3 or more notes together at the same time. It does not mean you're using 3 or more fingers. It means you're playing 3 or more notes. Technically, that's a chord. I didn't use any fingers. That's a chord. It's not a very attractive chord. Probably not one you're going to use in a song very often, but it is a chord nonetheless. So, like we said with the E minor, these chord diagrams are written straight up and down as if I'm looking at a guitar neck like this. The top line on most of these diagrams is going to look a little thicker than the rest. That's to represent the nut, which is this white thing right here on my guitar. Sometimes they might be made out of brass, and sometimes they're made out of graphite. But this is probably either plastic or bone. I'm not sure which one this is. I might have had it replaced at some point. Each one of the other horizontal lines running straight across represents one of your frets. The lines that run straight up and down represent your strings, and just like it looks in the diagram, the one all the way on the right hand side is your first string, the one on the left hand side is the sixth string. So I'm starting with the sixth string, Eddie, 8, Dynamite, Goodbye Eddie. The black dots represent where your fingers will go. In these diagrams, there is no fingering written there, so we have to kind of say, well, I got to have a finger here on the fifth string at the second fret, and I got to have another finger over here on the second fret on the fourth string. And that's kind of the chord we did last time. We'll kind of go through these chords kind of slowly. These are the kind of basic chords that are used in lots of different styles of music. It could be rock music, country music, jazz, blues, whatever. They're definitely used in some styles of music way more than often than others. Some guitar players use these like almost exclusively. Other guitar players seem to avoid them a lot, just simply because they just don't feel like playing the same chords everybody else does. But either way, these are all very, very commonly used chords. So with the E minor chord, what we discovered last week was I put my first finger on the fifth string at the second fret, and I'm going to move it, instead of having it right next to the second fret, I'm going to move it back away from it just a little bit, because I have to make room for my second finger to be in there. And the second finger is going to be placed on the second fret on the fourth string. So they're not exactly side by side like they appear in that diagram, but they're one's sort of moved back a little bit to make room for the other. And I'm going to play all 6 strings. Like so. And I want to, after playing it, I want to go through there and I want to sort of check each string to see if I got a clear sound. Now, one thing that I think is kind of important is don't get hung up. If one of your notes isn't clear, don't get hung up on that one. Let's just go through all 6 of them one at a time first and figure out which ones are clear and which ones aren't. Then we can go back and we start working on which ones. But let's just go through the whole chord. So that one's a little bit buzzy, so we'll come back to that in a second. That one's the open third string, and that's a little fuzzy too, so I'm going to come back to that in a second as well. And the second string's okay. The first string's a little bit weird too, okay? Well, we're going to fix that first. And one thing that happens a lot is we don't even ever see this. Like, how's the first string, which is an open string, how's that getting muted? If you notice, this part of my hand back here is actually touching that part of the string. And so what I need to do is I need to move my hand away from the guitar. And that's one of the things that you'll hear people talk about, keeping the thumb down low behind the neck. It allows me to then arch my hand or have some space in here because my hand is kind of curled, have some space in there. So I can get that first string a little clearer now. So again, that one's still a little fuzzy. The third string is a little fuzzy too, and you think, well, why is the third string fuzzy? It's an open string. The back underneath side of my second finger might be touching it a little bit. So what I've got to do is just take my fingers and just curl them upwards just a little bit, just bring them up like that. And when I do that, it gets it away from the third string, so it's no longer touching. It doesn't really take much to move your fingers up like this, and it also doesn't take much to let them kind of relax, and when you pull them downwards like that, that's usually what happens. It mutes the string a little bit. So I know it seems like a lot of detail, and you don't learn the stuff overnight. It takes a lot of practice, but if you want to know why these things are happening, that's why, and that's how you fix them. And so it's just a little bit at a time. When I started playing guitar, E minor was my favorite chord because it had 4 open strings. It was the only one I could make sound anywhere remotely nice. All the other ones were awful, and probably because all the open strings. I don't recall whether I had any muted strings or not, but gradually as you go through it, you start to say, okay, if I do this with my hand, I can get a much better sound out of it. So again, these are all things that you don't just like start doing them, but they're just things to keep in the back of your mind. If I curl my hand outwards like this and keep it away from the guitar, it gives me a little more room to play with, so it helps my notes sound better. I always kind of show people this other thing is that the thumb in the back and my fingers on top are really the only thing that should really be touching the guitar. I don't really hold it with the palm of my hand. If you hold it with the palm of your hand, it's going to probably make your fingers lean over, and you're going to have a lot of trouble getting a clear sound out of almost any chord. So that, even though that gives you a lot more strength and gives you something you can really squeeze against, it's probably not the best way to hold the guitar, because it doesn't really give you a lot of angle that you need with your fingers to curl them around. The last one that we worked that I need to fix is the fifth string. And the fifth string is one that we said, well, we have to keep that finger a little farther away from the second fret, simply because I have to make room for my other finger. If I try to put them side by side, like it looks in the diagram, it just pushes this finger off into the other strings. So I have to sort of have them side by side like this a little bit more, or lengthwise a little bit more. Because this finger's a little farther away from the fret, I am going to have to push a little bit harder. If I don't, I'm going to get that rattly, buzzy sound like that. So if any of you are hearing that, that's unfortunately what we have to do, is we have to push a little bit harder. And once I push a little harder, it gets back to being a clear sound again. So there's the E minor chord. Okay? For those of you who, after you do that for a little while, you might think, well, my fingers are starting to hurt and everything. I want to show you something. I don't know if you can see that, but my fingers still get dense in the end of them. It doesn't hurt anymore, but they still get dense. The dents will go away in a minute or two. It's not permanent or anything. But what happens is you will get calluses on your fingers where they'll be toughened up, and it won't actually hurt your fingers. It takes a little bit of time to do that, practicing and stuff. One recommendation that I always have is, don't say, well, I'm going to get calluses soon. I'm going to go practice for 10 hours today. Because if you practice for 10 hours, your fingers are going to be raw, they're going to be sore, and then you're not going to be able to play for like 5 days. So it's not really going to do you much good. So I just tell people, just do a little bit of time. Like do a half hour, split it up 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, something like that. Get those fingers toughened up, but don't try to do it all in one day, because it probably won't work out well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the E minor chord here, and we're going to sort of go backwards here. I'm going to go to the first chord that's on this sheet, which is right beside it. Oh, one other thing I guess I should point out. Down below the E minor chord diagram are some notes on the music staff. That's what those notes look like when they are written in standard musical notation. If you know how to read notes, we can figure out what each one of those notes are, and that's exactly how it would be written on a music staff as far as what we're playing. In classical music, this is the way they write guitar chords. They actually write them in standard music notation. So your reading has to be pretty good and everything. They usually don't even tell you the name of the chord you're playing. If you saw a song in classical music and you had to play an E minor chord, it wouldn't even tell you E minor. It would just have the notes written up on top, and you don't even think of E minor. You just think, well, there's those notes. Down below the standard musical notation, down below that is tablature. That's what the tablature actually looks like for the E minor chord. So on the sixth string down there is the open sixth string, second fret, fifth string, second fret, fourth string, open third, open second, open first. It's good to learn how to read the chords in tablature, but it's definitely very, very common when the chords are actually chords like this, where they're kind of normal, what we call open string chords, G, E minor, C, D, A, B7, all that kind of stuff. Almost always you'll have the chord name written up above it, like up here where it says E minor. And then a lot of times you're also going to have the actual diagram drawn in as well. Okay. So anyway, we're going to start with this E minor chord, and I'm going to draw on this thing again, at least temporarily. I'm going to draw here. You'll notice that this note, I'm going to try to circle it. hopefully it's pretty small, but I hope you guys can see that. The one I just circled in E minor chord, that note, that finger, that placement of your finger is also present in the G chord right there. They're both there's a dot at the same place. So I'm going to keep this finger right where it is. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my second finger, but I'm going to keep that finger right where it is, and I'm going to actually, one small change, I'm going to move it a little closer to the fret, but I'm not actually going to lift it up. I'm just going to move it up a little bit closer to the fret because I don't need to make room for anything anymore. So that right there. So now I have one finger in place for the G chord. And what I'm going to do here with I'm going to take my second finger and I'm going to place it over here on the 6th string at the 3rd fret, like so. Okay? Hoping you all can see that. I know watching a screen and watching somebody's tiny little picture is kind of tough, but anyway, there's my second finger on the 6th string at the 3rd fret. So those 2 fretted notes that I have so far sound like that. Okay? Then up at the top of the diagram, we see there's 3 zeros. Again, the zeros mean open strings. And then over here on the right-hand side, which is the 1st string on my guitar, there's a dot. Also at the 3rd fret on the 1st string. I'm going to use my 3rd finger for that. Okay? And that's what that one sounds like. So when I play all of these together, and you can see there's a note there's one note on every string here. If we want to read the tablature, it's the 3rd fret on the 6th string, the 2nd fret on the 5th string, open 4th, open 3rd, open 2nd, and then the 3rd fret on the 1st string. If I play these all together, that's what it sounds like. Okay? Now, I can only see a couple people's photos right now, or videos, while I'm sharing the screen, and I don't know if there's anybody young in our audience, but if there's anybody that, let's say, when I started playing I was 9, and it was really tough for me to get my fingers in place for that chord at all. So what someone showed, I guess I had a book of easy chords in it for people that were 9 years old, and I only did that much of the chord. I only did the part that I put the red square around. So, the red rectangle. So these 2 notes I let go, and I just played this much. And so I only strummed 4 strings, and I only used my 3rd finger on the 1st string. So if any of you are, so that's all I'm doing. If anybody plays ukulele, that looks like a ukulele C chord. I know Nick plays ukulele now. So if any of you are playing ukulele, it looks like a C chord on ukulele. Boy, that's confusing. But anyway, that's an easy way that if you're 9 or 10, your fingers aren't quite big enough to get wrapped around the whole guitar, that's one thing you can do for G. So I thought I'd point that out. I don't know if we have any younger players there. Even if you have a smaller guitar, it's still not always easy to wrap your fingers around up like that for the G chord. So let's start to make some music. If anybody needs to see that, I can always scroll back up. But again, we're not going to really be using the tablature very much. I only put that on there so you could see what the tablature would look like for that chord, what the standard notation would look like for that chord. When you see guitar music written, a lot of guitar music will look like this. This stuff down here with the little slash marks is called, believe it or not, called slash notation. That's exactly what it's called. And it's there's a definition in I believe it's on Wikipedia, and I really like this definition because it says that slash notation is something that's purposefully vague, and I like that whole description. The vague part of it and the fact that it's purposeful is really, really important. If I saw music like that and it said G and E minor, Right now, what I'm going to do to show you what we're going to practice is I'm going to pretend that each slash mark, I emphasize pretend, that each slash mark means one strum of that chord. So I'm going to play the G chord 4 times. And then I'm going to play the E minor chord 4 times. And then for those of you who remember, these are repeat signs. So we're going to repeat back to the beginning. And most of the time in music, that means repeat it one more time. So I end up playing it twice. But since we're talking about rock music and country music and pop music and jazz music and blues and all that kind of stuff, one of the things that you will do an awful lot in all those forms of music is repeat things over and over and over again. If you get a jazz band and you're in a jazz band and you go out and people decide we're going to play Take the A Train. Take the A Train has a standard song form. You play it over and over again. You play it for 5 minutes. The same thing over and over again. And then there's an ending and that's it. So repetition is definitely the key. I know sometimes everybody's like, that's all you do? I'm like, yeah, but you have to kind of know what you're doing. That's the trick, right? If you play it in a blues band, you've got your 12-measure blues pattern, and you play it over and over again. People sing, people play solos. The piano player does a little thing, the guitar player does a little thing. But it's the same thing over and over again. I don't mean to make it sound simple, but because it's not. But that's what makes it fun. But it is repeated. So when we do these, we want to get in the habit of just repeating them over and over and over again. And then we also know that our friend, the metronome, helps us keep rhythm. So I'm going to start at 60 beats a minute. That might be fast, that might be slow. When you practice, I wouldn't worry so much about what the numbers say. The only thing I would worry about is whether you can stay steady right with the metronome. Okay? So what I'm going to do is going to play the G 4 times, the E minor 4 times, and then we'll talk about what purposefully vague means. 1, 2, 3, 4. G. And I'm going to keep that first finger the same when I go to E minor. And I'm going to keep it the same when I go back to G. And then the same when I go back to E minor. And I'm going to play it again. And G, and E minor. Now, if you're like most people, when you first start out, unless somebody already knew how to play these chords, most people are like, I can't do this, right? It's really fast. So there's a couple things that we can do to help learn the chords, because obviously the main thing we want to work on here, believe it or not, is the steadiness of what we're playing. So the one thing that you can do, first of all, right off the bat, is slow it down. I would just pick 60 because it's 1 per second, but you can always go slower. There's a certain limit to how slow you can go. If you go 40 beats per minute or slower, it's a little hard to follow because it's so slow that you almost the human nature is almost to try to speed it up, even if you don't want to speed it up. You almost have human nature. It's really difficult to play slower than that. So there's a couple other things that you can do. Is you can rehearse what we call rehearse the finger movements. So I'm going to start with the G chord again, and I have my fingers set up like they are in the diagram, and I want to remember that this first finger stays the same. It doesn't move. And that's going to be a key through all these chords we're going to be learning today, is the fact that through every chord change, there's going to be at least one finger where there's a little trick involved in getting from one to the next. So from the G chord to the E minor chord, all I'm going to do is move that first finger back and make room for the second finger, like so. So I'm just moving it back and making room. And of course I'm taking my third finger off the guitar at all. So it's like this. And then when I want to go back to G, again, I'm keeping the first finger there. So the first trick is, instead of taking my second finger off and then putting it over here on the sixth string, I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it as like two separate things. I don't look at it like I'm taking it off and then moving it somewhere. I look at it as like I'm just going to move it over here to the 6th string. It's still essentially the same, but it's the way I'm viewing it. I'm viewing it all as being one motion, just moving it over to the 6th string. Now I've got 2 fingers in place. All I need is the 3rd finger over here on the 1st string. Okay? So it's still not easy, but like I said, if you just sort of rehearse the finger motions, and the first thing I do when I go from E minor to G, I make sure I don't lift this finger off and then put it over here, but I just move it. I try to move it right away. Then I don't have to worry about my 3rd finger. By the way, how many people have done this, where you take your right hand and move your left hand finger where you need it to be? Who's done that? Okay, because that's I know sometimes people are like, well, I'll do that with this finger. I'll move it with this hand. We can't do that when we play music. I can't stop in the middle of a song and say, move here. So you have to sort of learn how to do it. As tough as that may sound, you have to learn to do it with one hand. Okay. So anyway, that's one way of, quote, rehearsing the chord changes, or the finger movements. One other aspect of this is nobody ever has trouble playing a G chord. When you get to once you get your fingers in place, playing the G chord isn't the hard thing. Okay? Because once you got your fingers in place, we could sit and do this for a long, long time. It's like that's all I had to do. So what's hard about getting to it is getting to the G chord. We had making the G chord, forming the G chord. So this is kind of tricky. I'm going to show it to you first, and then we'll sort of explain what I'm doing. I'm going to go like this. I don't know if you can tell what I'm doing with my fingers, but every time I go to play the G chord, I'm pressing them into the strings. I'm pushing down as hard as I can into the strings. I'm trying to make them do it all at the same time. So it's sort of a muscle memory kind of thing. And then after I strum the chord, I'm relaxing the pressure with my fingers, like so. So they're not actually pushing down anymore. And so I'm doing that every time I strum. I'm pushing into the guitar, and then I'm relaxing and pushing into the guitar. And like I said, I'm trying to make it do it all at once. Now if I start going like this and it starts getting sloppy, and I start getting them at the wrong spot and like that, well, what I'm going to do before I do anything is I want to move them back where they're supposed to be, and then I'm going to start the whole process again. And they might go to weird places again, and I'm going to move them back. Trying to do that's more of a muscle memory exercise. So it's not a how do I get from G to E minor, but it's really just how do I get to a G chord. I can do the same thing with E minor. I can sit there and just press my fingers into the guitar. And again, it's not really how do I get from G to E minor, but just how do I get to E minor, period. So I'm working on the muscle memory. Okay? And then I'm going to slow the metronome down. This is to 50. And again, I know the real tendency is to go like this. And to pause and wait until your fingers are ready. I know. I did the same thing. We all did that. There's the E minor. And I'm going to pause and wait until I get back to the G. But let me show you something. I'm going to play with the metronome, and I'm going to intentionally get my fingers on the wrong spots, like this, and we'll see how noticeable it is. Okay, so I'm going to intentionally play the chords wrong a little bit, and now I'm going to play the other way. I'm going to play this time. I'm going to play, and I'm going to wait until my fingers are ready. So we're going to put a little bit of pausing in there, and we're going to hear what that sounds like. And I'm going to wait again until my fingers are ready. And I think you can tell that it's a whole lot more noticeable when I don't play, when I put the space in there, right? When I have silence. because then you hear the metronome going, or if you're playing with other musicians, they would keep going and you're not. And so it's a lot more noticeable. When you get your fingers in the wrong spot, you'll probably notice it a lot more than the people who are playing music with you will ever notice it. You will probably notice it more often than your audience will notice it. Your audience is not going to sit right in front of your guitar and study whether your fingers are in the right spot all the time. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter if you notice it, because if you notice it, that's kind of important. But I'm just saying don't lose sleep over it. You will get better at those kind of things. Okay? Okay, purposefully vague. When I want to play a song and I see music like this, what the person who wrote the music is actually asking me to do, because they are being, again, purposefully vague, is they don't want to give me detail. They just want to say they want 4 beats of G and they want me to play 4 beats of E minor. How I choose to do that is up to me as a musician. They would probably give the bass player similar music, they would give the piano player similar music, and they would give the drummer something. It might not have the chords on it, but they might tell the drummer, okay, it's 2 beats. And then they give you a general style. They might say, well, I want you to play this and make it sound like the Counting Crows or something. All right, so if I do that, then I have to go. Still doing 4 beats of each one, but so when you hear people do that kind of thing, that strumming, which we're going to doing some of that next week, just sort of getting initiated into how people strum chords. Your music still might look exactly the same, so if everybody says, well, how do I know what to play? I'm like, that's where your experience as a musician comes in. If you know how to play, if you've learned some Counting Crows songs, you'll know what it means to play in their style. If you know how to play a Green Day song, you'll know what it's like to play in the Green Day style. If you know how to play Led Zeppelin, you learn what it's like to sort of play in a Led Zeppelin style. And most often, when people give you music like this, they'll give you some kind of hint. I mean, if you show up and if it's a blues gig and you're a blues recording session, you're obviously going to have some warning about that, right? You're going to know what style of music you're playing. So usually that's kind of what people have, some kind of idea that they give you. But again, purposefully vague. But what we're doing right now is pretending that each slash mark is one strum of the chord. So I want to point that out in case you're wondering. That's not what you're going to do forever and ever and ever, but that's what this slash notation means. Just like we had going from a G chord to an E minor, we're now going to have another chord that goes, we're going to go from an E minor chord to a C. And again, this time we have a finger that's in common with both chords, so we can keep it exactly the same. And this time with the E minor chord, it's going to be the second finger that stays the same. This time I don't even have to move it closer or farther away from the fret. It can stay exactly where it is. Now, for a lot of people, the C chord is their first chord they ever learned. It was the first chord I learned when I was 9. And so again, I don't know if we have anybody that's younger in our audience here, but if we do, I'll give you a head start. We can play, again, just that much of the chord. And you can just let the other part alone for right now, and when your hands get a little bit bigger, you can throw the extra dot in there if you want. Okay? So when I go from E minor to C, I'm going to keep the second finger the same. And again, I'm going to apply that same philosophy. Instead of saying I'm going to lift my first finger off and then put it somewhere else, what I'm going to do is just right off the bat is I'm just going to move it to the sixth string. I'm going to move it to the second string at the first fret. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm just going to take my first finger from the E minor chord and move it over to the second string at the first fret like that. Now I have 2 fingers in place for the C chord. Okay, and those of you who are 9 or 10 and have smaller hands, you're done because you already got 2 fingers in place. At that point, if you want to strum the chord, you want to strum from the 4th string down towards the floor, like so. Okay? For anybody that has adult-sized hands, if you want to go for one more dot, we got one more finger to put on there. It's the 3rd finger. It's going to be played on the 5th string at the 3rd fret, like so. And I'll show you there's a little trick with that as well. Also, the C chord is the first one that has an X up at the top. And I think we can see that X right there. And that X is placed over top of the 6th string. Remember, that's the one closest to us. That means that we're not going to play that string. We're not going to make any sound come out of that string at all. And we're going to start, so I'm going to put my pick right here by the 5th string. I'm going to put it right on top of the 5th string, and I'm going to strum down towards the floor, like so. Okay? Now I know everybody wants to know, why don't we play the 6th string? What happens if I do? It sounds like this. Okay? Which is not a bad sound. It doesn't make you want to run screaming out of the room or anything. But the C chord generally sounds a lot better if we don't play that string. For those of you who know music theory, that open 6th string is an E note, and an E note is part of a C chord, so everybody wants to know, why can't I play it with a C chord? Because the E note is now perceived to be the lowest note of the chord. And we won't get too far into that, but generally speaking, whatever the name of the chord is, that's usually what you want the lowest note to be, the deepest pitch. And an E minor chord, the lowest note is in the 6th string open E. That's great. On the C chord, we don't want that open E string being the lowest note. We want the note here on the 5th string to be the lowest note, which is actually a C note. Okay? So when I go from the C then back to E minor, I'm going to take my 3rd finger, I'm going to remove it, and then I'm going to take this 1st finger, and again, just move it straight over here to the 5th string at the 2nd fret, and then back to E minor again. So C and E minor. And we can do that same rehearse the finger movements with it. Is just kind of go back and forth and see how your fingers how they have to move and how they have to fall when they go to the next chord. And you just kind of rehearse that. And it's not about how fast you go, it's just about, you know, getting your fingers accustomed to changing. And then of course we can also do that technique where we push our fingers into the strings, all one at a time, trying to do it all at the same time. And if I can do that, I'm making my fingers develop muscle memory, okay? With the C chord, a lot of times, even though it's everybody's first chord, it's not necessarily the easiest one. And especially what happens if you take your 3rd finger and you move it up right next to the 3rd fret on the 5th string. A lot of times it's going to lean over, and it's going to lean over so far that it'll actually touch the 4th string, which makes that sound. And then from the 4th string, that one, it makes that one lean over and it touches the 3rd string. And then the 1st fret on the 2nd string is usually okay, and then I get that out of the 1st string, and I play the whole thing. It just sounds like a mess, something like that, and don't really, you know, it's not all that. And everybody's like, I don't want to play the C chord, I don't like it. So what I tell people, that let's just take that thumb again and drop that thumb down just a little bit, which moves my wrist forward just a little. And what it does is allows my fingers just to curl up just a little bit more, get more on top of the guitar. Again, the only thing touching it is the thumb, my fingers. And hopefully you get a little bit better sound that way. Again, I would kind of look at this as this is, you know, accumulated practice. You don't, most of these chords you're not just going to sit down and do them right away, but they're all kind of basic chords that we have to learn. They're all used in different styles of music and everything. So getting a clear sound out of some of them is kind of hard. So then I go back to E minor and C. And again, then we can put the metronome on and hear what this sounds like. E minor, C, and E minor, and C, and E minor, and C, and so on and so forth. Repeat over and over again, as many times as you want. Then do it some more. Till you're really sick of it. Then do it even more. Anyway, now you've learned 3 chords. You probably think, well, some of them are easy, some of them are harder, some of them, I think everybody kind of agrees E minor's like kind of an easier one because it's only 2 fingers. A lot of people think C is a little bit more difficult. It's kind of normal. I know it's tempting to avoid the ones that are difficult, but they're the ones we really want to go for and get better because we're going to end up using all of these chords together. Okay, and now one final chord that we're going to take a look at. It again goes from the C chord. Here's the C that you just did. We have another finger in common with the C, and then this chord is called D7th, and there's a TH on the end of the 7th part that you pronounce, so you call it D7th. Well, to be honest with you, most of the time when musicians are reading through this stuff really fast, they'll read it just like it looks like, D7. I don't know how many times I've said that myself, and we all know it's a 7th chord with a TH on the end, but we still call it just D7, or if you see really weird ones like D7 sharp 11 flat 13 or something like that, you read it just like it looks. So anyway, you notice the D7 chord has 2 X's on it. So we're going to start with the C chord, and right here, this note, the one we're playing with the first finger, again is going to stay in common with both chords. Now, when I was 9, the D7 chord was my least favorite chord when I started, because it was the one that I needed 3 fingers for, and it hurt bad to put all 3 fingers down. It made them sore really fast. And there's no 9-year-old version of the D7 chord. You just sort of do it, and you get used to it. So we're going to start with C. And again, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take these other 2 fingers, and I got to try to do them at the same time, but I'm going to keep my first finger the same. I'm going to move my second finger to the 3rd string at the 2nd fret, like this. And I'm going to take my 3rd finger and move it over to the 1st string, also at the 2nd fret. Okay? And I guess for some people, if you start looking at these as like being shapes, the D7 looks like a triangle. Okay? So if that helps you remember what they look like, obviously that's a good way to sort of visualize the chords. I will point out that my 3rd finger is right next to the 2nd fret. My 2nd finger is moved backwards just a little bit. It's not quite right next to the fret. And again, I have to learn the positioning of where my fingers go so I can get a good sound out of these chords. And so not all my fingers can be right next to the fret. It just doesn't work that way. And my 1st finger is still at the 2nd string 1st fret. Then there's 2 X's on the chord, so I only want to strum 4 strings. Okay, like so. If I play 5 strings or 6 strings, I start getting this rumbling sound in the lower end of the chord. Like the chords all have this rumbling, especially because the C chord is only supposed to be 5 strings. If I go back and forth between C and D7, and I'm playing that extra string that I don't want, it starts to sound like that, right? Which isn't terrible, but not exactly what we're looking for. So how do we solve that? Well, a lot of people say, well, I'll look down here at my guitar, okay? And this is, again, goes with the looking thing. We don't want to look at the chords we're trying to play, look at the left hand, then look at the right hand, and then decide, oh, I'm going to play, and then have to look up here again, look down here, and then look back at the music. That's too much. So we could try to make the right hand automatic, where I can tell what I'm doing. Now, it doesn't mean that my right hand automatically knows where the 5th string is. What it means is I can listen, and I can tell when I play too many strings on the D7 chord. I can tell by what it sounds like. I'm hoping you can tell over Zoom. I'm hoping. I'm going to play all 6 strings, and you'll hear a difference. I mean, hopefully it's kind of obvious. So if you hear that sound come out, you know what happened. You played too many strings. You don't have to look. You know what happened. You try to correct it without looking. It's difficult to do because it's human nature. As soon as I make a mistake, I want to look down and see what happened, but I know what happened. I played too many strings. Then to go back from D7 back to C, I'm going to move my second finger back over to the 4th string, 2nd fret, and my 3rd finger back to the 5th string. And again, it's probably a little bit better to sort of not always get your fingers quite exactly perfect and not break rhythm. So I go like that. I can still adjust my fingers while I'm playing. Which is not nearly as noticeable as when I do this, when I stop. If I make them perfect, then I have to take all this extra time, and then there's silence, and everybody notices silence. They're like, "Hey, what happened to the music? You know, it's gone." So we don't want the silence there while we move back. So it's probably a little bit better to, if your fingers aren't quite perfect, just go ahead and put them down anyway. Trust me, you will get better at it. And we gave you these other 2 exercises, rehearsing the finger movement between the 2 chords, and then also developing the muscle memory so you can get them. There's other stuff on this sheet. Like I said.
When are we going to be done?
Excuse me?
When are we going to be done?
You mean like today?
Yeah. Like,
I think the lessons are over at 10 o'clock.
all right.
Okay. There's other stuff on this chord sheet, but what I would do, let me zoom out just a little bit so you can kind of see what the whole thing looks like. We did the first 3 chord exercises here with the slash mark. So we did G, E minor, then we did E minor and C, and we did C and D7. Okay.
But I don't know what to do because I was not in your other class.
Well, if you need me to, I can send you the links to the first 2 lessons if you want to revisit them, and you can watch those at some point during the week.
Okay. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. There's other videos.
I'll send those. Yep.
Yeah. The other classes have been recorded, so you can watch them when you want. Anyway, we've done these first 3 exercises: G, E minor, and C and D7. So the main thing that is to say, number 1, obviously memorize the chords, like where your fingers go, so that when somebody says play an E minor chord, you can do it right away. And that's going to probably take a little bit longer than a week, but that gives you a goal to say, okay, I want to have these things memorized. And then also the other thing is to actually try to work on changing between them so that there's no pausing in between any of them. Okay? Now, for those of you, some of you might already know how to play these chords. I know some people have had guitar in school and stuff like that, and maybe have some experience. So if you wanted to try, there's some other things on this page that are longer, but like I said, for somebody that's never done chords before, I would just go for those first 3, because everything on the bottom of this stuff is just really putting together everything we've done. So we've got one down here called G. It says G, E minor, C, and D7, all 4 together at the same time. And you just keep repeating that, and that is like an entire song. Okay? And you just keep repeating that. So any of you feel like working ahead, that's what we get to do. Okay? That's the chord sheet. I believe Nick will be sending it to everyone, and also the video is recorded. You can also obviously review the C major scale and the tablature and stuff like that in the other songs. The guitar has the advantage more so than maybe some other instruments in that we can do a variety of different things. When we play single notes, you might think of it as being a melody. Or a riff. Who played that song last week? It's probably way cooler than playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? But, so when you play those kind of things, that's like a riff, but they're like melodies to songs. But the other thing we can do is we can play like an accompaniment part to a song. That's what somebody would sing with. So guitar is kind of neat in that you can play melodically, you can play the harmony or the accompaniment part of the song, and you can actually also mix them together in ways where you can sort of play both at the same time, which is a little trickier, but it would be like, you know, something like, let's see. Something like that, right? Where you sort of maybe mix in a melody and chords together at the same time. I'm not saying we're necessarily ready to start all this finger picking stuff, but that's kind of one of the advantages. So that's where you sort of mix them together, is you mix in the single notes and you mix that in with chords. Okay. One final thing we'll show you is strumming. We mentioned when you strum. So far, all these chord exercises have been all downstrokes, and that's really what you should focus on. But for any of you who, when you see people on TV, or how do they make their guitars sound like that? This is what they're doing. They're strumming down and they're strumming up. And so I think it's sometimes kind of helpful to do that as well, is to just go like this with any chord you want. Now if I push really hard into the chord and I hit it really hard, it sounds like this. And I don't think most people would agree, I don't want to sound like that, right? So what they really try to do is you try to strum like brush across the strings like this. And when I strum up, I'm probably only going to hit maybe 2 or 3 strings. So I don't want to strum like this where I'm trying to hit them all. That makes it sound like I'm a machine, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to strum down, strum up, strum down, strum up, down, and up. And just nice and light. Something like that. So it's nice and light, smooth sounding. Looks like Casey has a capo on the guitar. Yeah. Who knows what this thing is? This little thing right here. Anybody ever use one? I know Casey is using one right now. It's called a capo, by the way. So if you ever see anybody using what these is, they're a lot of times transposing their instruments so that they can play the chords and they sound different when you play them up here. Okay, so I just saw that and I thought it was kind of neat that you had one on. So cool. Any other questions about anything? Anything? Okay. Like I said, the Noah wants to get a capo. Yeah, they're kind of neat. There's one. This one is pretty old, and I think the spring's worn out because it takes like both hands. It's not supposed to take both hands to put it on, But I think they make some that are smaller profiles. Doesn't Diodario or Planet Waves make one that's a little smaller than that? That kind of works about the same, I think. Something like that. Yeah, so there's a variety of different types of capos. But the advantage that one has is you're supposed to be able to put it on with one hand. But I mean, this is probably 20 years old at least. And the spring's kind of worn out, so it's kind of hard to move at some point. But it does allow you to play a lot of some of the chords we did today. You know, stuff like that. So anyway. The video, Nick will send you a link to the video and the PDF that we used today with the chords on it, and I guess we'll see you all next week.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
You're
I'll send
welcome.
all that stuff out, and have a good weekend, everybody.
See ya.